Okay, everyone. Are you ready? Are you ready? This is what we've been building up to for the entire semester. Strategy. Marketing strategy, but strategy. And developing a marketing plan. Some argue that this should have been first. I think it's a really difficult time doing this first without you having all of the layering leading up to where we're at the moment. So, that said, the heart of marketing and the heart of any plan is to deliver value. Now, we've already talked about this a little bit. Now, value is that give-get ratio. Value is, it's always in the eye of the beholder, the customer. But it's that inflection point of, okay, what am I giving up to get? And do I feel that I'm getting a good deal giving what I'm giving up, usually dead presidents, versus what I am getting in return? Okay. Now, when we talk about value, I also like to use that term, as I mentioned before, WIIFM, what's in it for me. If there is something in it for me, the customer is going to care. If there's nothing in it for them, they're not going to care. And that inflection, the give-get ratio, you might have to, you as the marketer might, if your product quality is not all that good, then you might have to make the ratio, okay, not good quality, but what is the customer getting? By saying WIIFM, you're thinking about it from their perspective, which is the key to any value conversations. That said, value can be, there could be many different types of value: form, time, ownership, place. So place utility could be location. I mean, the reason convenience stores work and the reason that you can buy gum anywhere is because it's a convenience good. You need utility of place, right? Ownership utility. Well, you could buy a car, or you could lease a car, or you could Uber a car. This is different types of ownership models. Owning versus leasing versus renting. That's ownership utility. Time utility. Okay, next day shipping, or Amazon is exploring in Manhattan 2-hour delivery. This is time utility. Okay, there's other examples of time utility. And form. Okay, take something as simple as sugar. So there are various different types of, there's powdered sugar, there's brown sugar, there's granulated sugar, there's liquid sugar, there is sugar substitutes, there are agave, there are multiple different forms of the same product. And it could be size, it could be flavor, it could be shape. All of this impact the what's in it for me. So another way to talk about value is the value proposition. It's the firm's unique value offering to the customer. Does this sound like anything else we talked about earlier? Maybe in the STP module we talked about USP, unique value proposition. Unique selling proposition, actually. I just said value proposition. We're all talking about the same thing. And marketers need to do a good job of telling consumers what's in it for them. The inflection needs to be in favor, the give-get ratio, the value, needs to be in favor of the consumer. So the whole value message is the complete bundle of benefits that the company or the product promises to deliver. Okay? So this whole idea of give-get ratio, WIIFM, is at the core of everything we do. Because, as we've talked about before, if we have customers that are satisfied, Satisfied customers will then become loyal customers, which means we can count on them for future behavior. If we can count on them for future behavior, either purchasing or positive word of mouth, we probably can count on them for customer retention. And if we're retaining customers and we have satisfied, loyal to customers, chances are they will be switching to our competitors less. Now, the value chain. This is another very core aspect of marketing. The value chain, this is Michael Porter's value chain. And from this is where, and after this came out, this is where we can trace the roots of supply chain management to. So prior to Michael Porter, and by the way, when we talk about Michael Porter, we're talking about this. This 1985 book is basically the Genesis Bible, or the Genesis chapter of strategy. He wrote a book in 1980 called Competitive Advantage. And then the competitive advantage concept was so strong that he elaborated significantly more. This book is twice as thick as the 1980 Competitive Strategy. Actually, it was called Competitive Strategy. Within the 1980 Competitive Strategy book, he then expanded it greatly to, competitive advantage was the most important concept in the Competitive Strategy book. So when he expanded the book, he decided to rename it Competitive Advantage. This is where this conversation comes from. So the company does logistics, inbound logistics, to operations, to outbound logistics, to marketing and sales, and to service. And what Porter argues for is for a company to look for ways to increase value in every one of these steps, in between and then across multiple of these steps. The more value you can deliver within the chain, the more margin you can make at the end. Now, these are the primary activities that businesses do. These are the support activities that businesses do. Almost think about these as, like sort of external and internal. Internally to the firm, how our firm is structured, how we manage our people, how we develop innovation and technology, and how we source stuff, inbound, outbound, procurement. These are also areas that cut across all 5 of these, which is why they're written this way. Okay? Now, from this, this is where supply chain management kind of evolved from. Because prior to this conversation and it developing in the late 80s and the early 90s into supply chain management, when we talked about channels tended to be only about the channel between these two, or logistics only about the shipping between here and here, and logistics between here and here. We never considered the whole ball of wax and how something that can impact here will impact here, or something that happens here impacts here and impacts here. That is more of a supply chain management conversation. And the people and the procurement and the innovation and how the firm is structured should maximize value in every one of these steps. Now, these next 2 slides is exactly the same thing I just talked about on that previous slide. He calls them primary activities. These are the things that are at the bottom of this image. And these are value creating activities. These are the things the firm does to support all 5 of those value creating activities. Okay? In essence, what we want to come down to is a sustainable competitive advantage. Not just a competitive advantage. We need something that we can sustain over time. Now, Porter talked about location being a competitive advantage, or your operations, manufacturing being a competitive advantage. On the customer side, being a competitive advantage. Maybe on the product or service, quality-wise, you have a competitive advantage. But you need some kind of sustainable competitive advantage that will last. Because in today's day and age, competition will catch you and they will catch you rather quickly. I don't care how far of a lead you have, whatever lead you have, if you do not continue to add to your lead, you will be caught. Microsoft got caught by the late 90s, early 2000s. And they were a, oh my gosh, monster. Nokia was the king of cell phones. BlackBerry was the king of quote-unquote early smartphones. They got caught. Their competitive advantage was not sustainable. They were outflanked by competition, particularly Apple and particularly Google, because the touchscreen app ecosystem, that was something BlackBerry was not willing to support. So their sustainable competitive advantage could not last. Okay? We're looking for a sustainable competitive advantage. So here is the marketing plan. We're going to go through all steps of this. But broadly speaking, we have a planning phase, we have an implementation phase, and we have a control phase. The planning phase, we're looking at mission and objectives, and we do our situation analysis. And then finally, we do our implementation stage. This is really the strategy of what we're going to do. And we talk about STP, and we talk about PPP and P. Then finally, we have evaluation and control. For every one of you that is listening to this, when you do your capstone course and when you do your final project, I'm going to see a bunch of these at the end of July in a couple of weeks. This is pretty much the flow you're going to have to present to the external assessors. So let's first look at defining who are we? What are we doing? Mission statements or visions need to be specific and defining. Seton Hall's mission statement is concepts into practice, meaning strong theoretical work in the classroom. That is also something that can be applied to actual practice. The other side of that is mission-driven ethical leadership. Ethics is a strong component of who we are at Seton Hall. So everything that we do in creating courses or designing courses or supporting courses is around these two specific missions: ethics-centered leadership and concepts into practice. This here is an example of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They want to stop drunk driving, support the victim of the crime, and prevent underage drinking. So there's 3 elements to their mission statement. Everything that they do should support one or more of these 3 things, not stuff outside of that. So you define your mission and who you are and what you expect to achieve. Step 2 is you need to do a situation analysis. Okay? There are multiple ways to do a situation analysis. Now, the traditional one is a SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But there are other analytical tools that I'm going to describe. So I'll do SWOT and then I'll do some more. SWOT. When we talk about, let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you. When we talk about a SWOT analysis, S stands for strengths, W stands for weaknesses, O stands for opportunities, and T stands for threats. Sorry, cold medication, remember? Strengths and weaknesses are internal to the firm. Opportunities and threats are external to the firm. So this is an example here where we're looking at the coffee market, primarily in the United States, but we're looking at the coffee market and we're looking at the 3 dominant players of coffee sellers. That would be Starbucks, McDonald's, and Dunkin' Donuts. Now you may think it was just Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, but McDonald's sells gobs and gobs and gobs of coffee here, okay? Tons of coffee. So you can talk about the brand and the channel structure as a strength. Weaknesses, there is some licensed stores and some joint ventures, too much rapid growth. Opportunities and threats. We can look at McDonald's: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We can look at Dunkin' Donuts: strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Remember earlier we were talking about STP? we can segment the market. We just segmented the market into the major players. You know, and then we would say, okay, high quality, high price, low quality, lower price. These are probably in different quadrants, although the Dunkin' people probably just got really mad at me about that. But we know Dunkin' is cheaper than Starbucks, styrofoam cups, paper cups, you know. McDonald's is trying to undercut even Dunkin'. You know, think about it. McDonald's might be more about geographic, you know, we have to decide how we're going to segment. But these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, these are the things, and this analysis is what we're going to use to help us decide how we're going to position ourselves versus the competition within a particular quadrant. Now, Porter, again, okay, let me reduce back down. Sorry about that. One more. Porter again, he tends to say that marketing and strategy, there's really only 3 strategies. Only 3. The most common is differentiation. Now, most people try to differentiate in terms of quality, either high or low quality. But you being able to tell your customer base clearly how you are different than everyone else, okay, that's a big deal. Another strategy is cost leadership, either in terms of high cost or low cost. This tends to be a low cost type thing. But if you can sustainably be cheaper than all your competitors around you, that could be a sustainable competitive advantage. It's Walmart's sustainable competitive advantage in their everyday low pricing, and that strategy permeates through the entire firm, so much so that they make supply chain decisions based on that explicit everyday low price, every ELDP pricing strategy. Then finally, there's focus or a niche. And pretty much in every marketplace out there, particularly mature marketplaces, they're not growing as much. There's usually enough room for 3. It's the rule of 3. 3 players. There's usually a number 1, a strong number 2, and some niche player. A small player that has some segment of the market that the number 1 or the number 2 player doesn't want to bother with. Okay? Let's look at laptops. You know, a perfect niche player is Panasonic. When you think of laptops, you don't think of Panasonic as a dominant player in the laptop market. But if you want to talk about construction, or if you want to talk about police or fire, they make tough books. You ever see a tough book? It's about this thick. But you could drop this thing. You could drop a computer off a 2-story building and it land on concrete and nothing will happen to this computer. This is a very niche part of the overall laptop market, and the Apples of the world and the Dells of the world and the HPs of the world don't want to have to develop that product. They don't want to have to develop that sales channel, so they cede that little niche of the marketplace to Panasonic. Panasonic's happy to own it. Another rubric or lens you can think about when developing strategy and how you want to take your firm or product going forward is you can look at Porter's, again, Porter 5 forces model. You know, you can look at, okay, let's look at the marketplace and let's look at these 5 particular forces. So what is the threat that more companies could come into this marketplace, high or low? What is the threat that there is a lot of substitute products that can easily swap, that customers or competition can easily swap yours for someone else's? You know, can a police department easily, let's stay with the tough book example. Is there an easy swap between product A and product B? Well, HP and Apple and Dell don't make something that can survive extreme temperatures, extreme heat, drops, falls, punches, who knows what else. You know? I mean, if we look at Guitars? Most of these guitars, you can pretty much swap them out for one and each other. There might be preferences for A and B, but a guitar is a guitar, and they make nice guitars, and guitars are guitars. You know. There isn't a huge, there's a lot of substitutes when it comes to guitars. So then we look at the competition within. Is this a highly competitive marketplace? Is there a lot of rivalry within this marketplace in this segment? Or there isn't that much competition? Look at the shaving market and Gillette. They own it. Okay? Now, if we stay with the Gillette example, there isn't a whole lot of competitive pressure there in the shaving market. There's some, but not a whole lot. So we have buyer power and we have supplier power. There are some marketplaces, like I'm doing this on a computer right now, that the chip manufacturers for the computers, they hold a lot of sway in the supply chain, because without the chip, there's 4 or 5 things that a computer needs that could stop the entire process. There are 4 or 5 things out of the 169 different parts to this thing that without it, you're in deep trouble. And there's not that many people that make them. The screen, the chip, there's more than one chip, by the way. Those things, without them, you're dead in the water. So the suppliers might have a lot of sway. Apple's new phone, not this one, this is the 8, not the X or the 10. It's actually called a 10, not an X. There is only 2 suppliers in the world that make OLED screens. This is not a high definition 4K OLED screen. This is just a high definition screen. This is like somewhere between, this is like almost like 1080 DPI, right? Where OLED is like 4K. It's like 4000 DPI. Well, only Samsung and only LG make OLED panels at any size. Okay? And then Apple had a hard time with getting the LG ones up to the color specifications that they demand on their devices. So they really only had Samsung. And Samsung actually makes the screen for iPhone and the chip for iPhone. Apple designs the chip, Apple designs the screen, but from a manufacturing process, without Samsung, there is no Apple. Kind of funny, isn't it? When we talk about marketing planning and we talk about products and services, there are 4 different ways for us to think about this. And we can talk about them in terms of penetration, development, and diversification. So when we think about this, we think about it in terms of our products and services, whether it's a current product or service, or whether it's a new product or service. And then we think about the market, if it's a current market or a new market. If it's a current product in a current market, we're just trying to get more market share in existing marketplace. We call this market penetration. If it's a current product, if it's a new product in a current market, we are developing a new product for the current market. See that? If we have a current product in a new marketplace, we call that market development. The easiest example for this is when we take a product that we already sell in one marketplace and we take it to an international market, and we're developing that new international market. If we have a new product in a new market, this is a diversification strategy. This doesn't impact any of these other 3. It's completely separate. And let's see, what's a good example of this? I'm watching the World Cup right now. I'm seeing a lot of commercials for Jägermeister. Okay? Classic example. So Jägermeister is a European-based, primarily German product. And in Germany, believe it or not, Jägermeister is it's a cough medicine. Yes, it was originally a cough medicine. Somehow, someone thought we should, change the bottling and change the packaging a bit. And, people in the United States would really love to do shots of that at a bar. Well, that would be a current product in a new marketplace, and that's market development. Right? Kind of neat. But if Jägermeister were to create a beer, Jägermeister doesn't make beer. Jägermeister doesn't make wine. Both of those would be new products, and they would be in markets that they never competed before. So, that would be diversification. Well, if it's a current market, let's say Germany, then it would be product development. If it's a new market, say United States, then say it would be diversification. Okay? All right. You guys had an entire video on STP. I'm a huge fan of STP, segmenting, targeting, positioning, of which the reason why we position, and positioning is difficult, is because we have to do a good job with things like this. This is the magic behind making positioning work. And what companies get stuck at is they segment well and they target well, and they don't do a good enough job once they target a specific marketplace in telling you how they are different. I mean, this is an example here on the screen of the rental car market. All right. I mean, do you guys really do anything with the rental car market other than search for price and availability? Price, availability, and is the car available in the airport, or do I have to go outside the airport? I mean, is really Hertz and Avis any different there? I mean, maybe you have loyalty card stuff with Hertz, or maybe you have, points with Avis, and that gets you to switch from one to the other. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, these companies are interchangeable. Step 4, after we create our specific positioning and our targeting, well then guess what? Step 4 is going into what we do. P, 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 and P. We need to get that give-get ratio right. We need to have the right value proposition and the sustainable competitive advantage, and we will use all 4 of our P's to accomplish that goal. P, 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 and P. Okay? So, product and value, well, we've already talked about these in extent. The price, place, and promo. Yes. And finally, to wrap up, we make adjustments. We do evaluation and we make adjustments over time. And please forgive me for giving you another 2x2 matrix. Academics love 2x2 matrices. So we do the STP, we do the P, 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 and P, and we sit back at 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and we are looking at our performance. Let's talk about performance in terms of market share and market growth rate. Right? So our relative market share, if we could have high market share or low market share, right? And then the market itself in the product development process, it could be a market that's in the introduction phase, the growth phase, the maturity phase, or the decline phase, right? So if we have a product that does have really high market share and the market is still growing at a very, very double-digit fast growth, we have a product or a service that we would call a star, okay? We invest and put more money into stars because we have a lot of market share and the market's growing a lot. We'll do more product development, we'll do more promotion, we'll do more everything. Now, if we are in a marketplace that is growing, double-digit growth, but we don't have something with a high market share, we have a question mark, and we got to make a decision. Our goal would be to move or to do innovation and see if we can gain more market share and do more benchmarking and do more SWOT analysis and probably find a different position to move ourselves to where we can gain market share because we'd rather be here. So let's pretend we have a product with high market share, But the market itself isn't growing that much anymore. It's single-digit growth. It's 1%, 2%, 3%. But you have a lot of market share in a relatively large market. Think Coca-Cola. So what's Coca-Cola going to do? It's pretty much going to hold its position. It's not going to expend enormous resources in the cola market because the cola market's not growing anymore. You milk it. It's a cash cow. You don't overexpend in your promotion. You don't overexpend in R&D. You try to find ways to manage costs to the best of your ability because you want to maintain profit and margin for as long as you possibly can. Because eventually the marketplace is going to decline, where you could have a situation in a market that's not growing anymore and you have a product that's got low market share. Please don't be offended that they call this a dog. Okay? I like dogs. I don't own a dog. I had a dog when I was a kid. I really love dogs. But they're calling a dog something you want to divest. It's a dog. Okay? We really want to, if we're in this position, company A is trying to divest. They want out. They want out. You know, you're not moving in this direction because the market's not growing. You're not moving in this direction because you don't have a high market share. You do your best to get out of this marketplace. A long time ago, GE, when they were healthy, they're not healthy anymore. They just got delisted by the Dow Jones. They're not one of the 30 anymore, or they're not one of the Dow Jones companies anymore after being there for decades and decades and decades and decades. But one of their famous CEOs, Jack Welch, literally would tell every business division, I want you to be number 1 or number 2, a plan to be number 1 or 2, or a plan to get out. Those are the only 4 things you do. You're either number 1 and maintain 1, number 2 and do your best to stay in that marketplace and gain more market share. Give me a really good plan to either become the number 1 or number 2 player in that marketplace, either through acquisition or new product development or whatever. And if you don't give me a good enough plan, I want the plan for you to get out. Sell the division, and let's use that capital to buy another company in another segment that we know that can become the number 1 or number 2 player. That's it. That's what Jack Welch did for the better part of 20 years. And it was relatively straightforward, and it was relatively very successful. Thank you for your time. This was we needed to do all those other modules before we got the strategy, but this was a good way to wrap up. Thanks.